Welcome to this episode of our program, Arab Affairs. Today we'll be speaking about several Arab files, but before I start with any discussion to any of the files, I have to say that today is the 24th, tomorrow would be the 25th, and we celebrate the 25th of April every year for the liberation of Sinai. It's a great memory for all Egyptians when we were able to put our flag on the last part of Sinai, except for Taba, on the 1982, when we retrieved the last piece of this precious part of our lands. This is a very remarkable day in our history, and we as Egyptians always celebrate the retrieve of our lands. That has started the negotiations for the last meter in our lands until the end that we got it in 1989. But the flag was raised on Sinai again on the 25th of April 1982. Let me here speak a little bit about this memory, because it's a dear memory to the Egyptians, and it's a matter of pride for all of us. So I have to say that April the 25th marks, as I said, Sinai Liberation Day, and this year, it's 2021, marks the 39th anniversary of the departure of the last Israeli forces from Sinai in 1982, except from Taba, which was restored by Egypt through international arbitration, and we won it and got the last piece of it by 1989. Israel has occupied Sinai on June 5th, 1967, before Egypt waged the 6th of October 1973 victory, and restore our lands, or has pushed and has pressured Israel to negotiate with Egypt a peace treaty in which we got the rest of our land after that. Egypt has begun the war of attrition right after the 1967 war. It's, if I may say, the next day or almost few days after, leading up to the 1973 war and the destruction of the Bar-Lev line that was called by the Israelis, or claimed by the Israelis, the Invincible. That caused the loss by Israel, and the line was a chain of fortification built by Israel along the eastern bank of the Suez Canal. Egypt was able to destruct it totally. North Sinai has been hit by terrorism, but that came in that period that have seen a year lost in our history, and of course we have, after the 1973 war, and after we put our flag on Sinai, we started the development in Sinai until this particular year, 2012, came, and we and Sinai has started to see some of the terrorism hitting the area. That has been very much confronted by our brave armed forces and police and police forces, our armed and police forces. That has been all done through the period. Now terrorism is being confronted by all forces and by all force, and we have restarted the development or the developmental process of Sinai Peninsula Sinai has been seeing lots and lots of developmental plans. It has been seeing roads, highways, tunnels. It has been seeing some of the agricultural projects. It has been seeing infrastructure projects. It has been seeing industrial projects, and of course ports and logistical hubs. Sinai is first priority for Egypt. It has always been, and it will always be, and it is part of our pride to celebrate the liberation of the Sinai Peninsula. Before we delve into our discussion, which we will be speaking about later on in this episode, Libya and the latest visit of Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli to Libya, and the latest negotiations between Saudi Arabia and Iran over some of easing intention. Before we delve into our discussion, let's first have this break and then the report, and then we'll come back for more discussion.
Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry delivered a letter from President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to his Tunisian counterpart Qais Said on Addis Ababa's Ethiopian Dam on Thursday. Shoukry was received by his Tunisian counterpart Othman el-Jaranda. The visit comes as part of his six-nation African tour by the top diplomat to update African leaders on the negotiations of the dam. Tunisia was the last leg of the foreign minister's African tour. The Arab League, United Nations, European Union and the African Union demanded an immediate withdrawal of all foreign forces from Libya. In a statement after a video conference by its leaders, the so-called Libya Quartet demanded full compliance with the arms embargo and the immediate and unconditional withdrawal of all foreign forces and mercenaries from the entirety of the Libyan territory. The much violated arms embargo has been in place since 2011, when an uprising toppled longtime Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi during the regional upheaval known as the Arab Spring. A Syrian officer was killed and 3 soldiers were wounded on Thursday in strikes launched by Israel after a missile was fired towards secretive Dimona nuclear site in Israel. Syrian state news agency SANA said that the strikes destroyed air defense batteries, adding that the Syrian air defense batteries intercepted most of the missiles. The exchange of fire comes less than 2 weeks after Iran accused Israel of terrorism following an explosion at the Republic's Natanz nuclear facility. Pope Francis promised Lebanon's Prime Minister designate Saad al-Hariri that he would visit the country, but only after political forces put aside differences for the good of the people. The Vatican said that al-Hariri, who will also meet with the Italian leaders during a short visit, held talks with the Pope for about 30 minutes. Al-Hariri told Lebanese television afterwards that the Pope would visit, but only once its fractious politicians were able to agree on a new government. A Vatican statement said that Francis reaffirmed his closeness to the Lebanese people, who are living through very difficult and uncertain times, and spoke of the responsibility of all political forces to urgently commit themselves to the good of the nation. 3 rockets crashed into a base at the Iraqi capital's airport housing U.S. troops on Friday, in the latest attack coinciding with tensions between Tehran and Washington. Witnesses said that the projectiles hit the section of the air base occupied by Iraqi forces, who share the base with U.S. soldiers as part of the U.S.-led anti-terrorist coalition. Security sources said that 1 Iraqi soldier was wounded. It is the second attack on U.S. interests in Iraq in less than a week. On Sunday, 5 rockets targeted another air base north of the country, wounding 3 Iraqi soldiers and 2 foreign contractors.
Right, welcome back. And as I said, that we will be speaking in our episode also about the visit of Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli to Libya and his meeting with the Libyan head of the Transitional Council and of the Transitional Sovereignty Council and the Prime Minister, and also how President Sisi was keen to receive the Prime Minister on his return and review all the meetings that he did. Before we start with our discussion, let's first have this quick look on this report and we'll come back for more discussion.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi gave his directives to provide Egyptian assistance to support Libya in all fields to implement the country's political roadmap until the elections in December. President el-Sisi gave his directives which aim to improve Libya's economic conditions and achieve security and stability while reviewing the outcome of a recent visit to Libya by Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli. Madbouli said that the visit was a clear message of Egypt's strong support for the unity and stability of Libyan territories and efforts to end tensions there. The Prime Minister briefed the President on the direct issues he discussed with Libyan officials, at the top of which was the reopening of the Egyptian diplomatic missions in Tripoli and Benghazi as soon as possible, in addition to the request of Libyan Prime Minister Abdelhamid el-Dibeiba to allow the return of Egyptian workers in the nearest time. According to Madbouli, el-Dibeiba asked for transportation to be facilitated between the two countries and the luring of Egyptian companies, especially in the fields of electricity, infrastructure, housing and transportation, in order to implement the various projects that will be launched in Libya. The Prime Minister discussed with el-Sisi the projects to be implemented in Libya in the upcoming period, as well as the role of Egyptian companies in the reconstruction of Libya. Madbouli also said that an agreement was reached with Libyan officials to resume meetings of the Joint High Egyptian-Libyan Committee in the upcoming weeks for the first time since their suspension in 2009. On Tuesday, Madbouli and el-Dibeiba signed 11 memoranda of understanding to enhance bilateral cooperation between the two countries in various fields. Both officials held a joint press conference to announce the issues they discussed during the meeting. El-Dibeiba praised the Egyptian role in supporting political dialogue between political factions in Libya, along with cooperating with them to reach a comprehensive solution to the Libyan crisis.
Right, welcome back. And to highlight the visit of our Prime Minister leading a cabinet delegation to Libya, we have with us over the phone Ambassador Hussein Hariri, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, madam.
And this recent visit by the Prime Minister, the head of the Egyptian government, leading a delegation, a cabinet delegation to Libya, and the number of files that were tackled during such a meeting. First, how do you view the significance of such a meeting, the timing of, or rather this visit, the timing of the visit, and the files that were discussed there?
Well, it was, to tell you the truth, madam, it was a very pleasant surprise to learn that the Egyptian Prime Minister, with a large ministerial delegation, would pay an official visit to Libya. And in fact, I personally believe that the visit and the results of which underline the importance of Egyptian-Libyan relations, point to the fact that we are turning a page that has lasted for 10 years in Egyptian-Libyan relations. And this visit and the 11 memorandum of understanding and agreements that were signed in Tripoli, I guess they usher a new phase in these bilateral relations between the two neighboring countries. And I believe that the future is quite promising. The agreements that were signed during the visit do cover many aspects of the bilateral relations between the two countries, and we understand that Libya has asked, the Libyan government has asked Egypt to facilitate the Egyptian labor coming to Libya in order to participate in huge construction and, or I may rather say, reconstruction efforts in Libya that will get underway once the elections next December are organized and Libya has, after 1 decade of turmoil, and Libya has a legitimate government that enjoys international legitimacy and accepted by the international community. So the visit, as I said, Madam, is quite significant and quite promising in the meantime.
Right. If I'm asking you here about the President's keenness, or he's keen to receive the Prime Minister right after the visit, to follow up with the visit and to give his directives to the Prime Minister. We've seen the President giving his directives to offer or to support Libyan people in all fields, in addition to expanding channels of cooperation between both countries. How do you view the keenness of the leadership to follow up with this very particular file? We have seen the President himself speaking about this very particular file several times, and that was his directives. So how do you view that?
Well, of course, I fully understand the reasons behind the review of the results of the visit that the Prime Minister made to President al-Sisi. And I guess the meeting, the one-on-one meeting between the President and the Prime Minister concentrated on the visit to Libya means that the President himself is interested both politically and personally in giving the Egyptian-Libyan relations his particular attention. Of course, this attention comes in a larger strategic context. Egypt, as you may know, Madam, has suffered from the insecurity and the political instability that have reigned in Libya during the last decade. And we are looking forward, Egypt is looking forward to a new phase in Libya where there is a government, a national unity government chosen by the Libyan people, enjoying legitimacy and working hard to get rid of the militias and the mercenaries that have wrought havoc in Libya and to Egypt, as a matter of fact, in the last few years. So of course, as you just mentioned, Madam, the two countries have agreed to nominate ambassadors, and that's another good step, and it means that relations between the two countries are about to be normalized. That is to say that relations, Egyptian-Libyan relations, would resort to the pre-2011 status. So I believe that the meeting between President Sisi and the Prime Minister was a significant one, was a message not only within Egypt but to the Libyans and to anyone in North Africa, that Egypt at the highest level is giving utmost attention to its relations with Libya.
We have seen the Prime Minister accompanied by a delegation of 11 ministers visiting Tripoli, and Dr. Madbouli said that the upcoming period is to see a boom in economic and social ties between Egypt and Libya. We have seen the Libyan side asking Egypt for the return of the Egyptian laborers. We have also seen the Libyan side asking Egypt to start investing and helping the Libyans reconstruct their own countries. We have seen several files opened between the Prime Minister and his Libyan counterpart in Libya. How do you view the files that were opened, or what, from your point of view, are the files that were opened? What are the Libyan challenges? How can Egypt play a role in Libya in this upcoming stage?
Well, dealing with this topic, Madam, we have to remember that Egyptian labor played a significant role in Libya before 2011, and even during the height of insecurity and instability in Libya. We had many Egyptian laborers, workers, still working in Libya. And we remember that some of them paid of their lives their presence in Libya, and they were victims of terrorist groups. Having said that, of course, in the future, cooperation between Egypt and Libya would cover new grounds in energy, for example. Libya, in the reconstruction that is expected to take place once there is a unity government, a legitimate government elected by the Libyan people next December, is expected to see a huge reconstruction program underway. So it needs energy, it needs well-reputed international and Arab contractor firms that have experience in reconstruction, and I guess as well as in the in transport and communications. So I think that we have a lot to offer Libya in the next few years. And of course, we are heartened by the reception that the Libyan government, the transitional Libyan government, has accorded to the Egyptian Prime Minister and to the accompanying delegation, and opening up. The message from Tripoli after this visit was that Libya is opening up to larger cooperation with Egypt in many fields. Particularly in the field of reconstruction, energy, transport, and communications and information technology.
Our third part here is that not just the nomination of ambassadors, but also the Egyptian and Libyan side decided that they are opening their embassies after Eid al-Fitr. If I may ask you here about how do you view the next stage in Libya? What are we expecting? What are the challenges that are facing Libya and the Libyans at this very particular upcoming stage? And what is requested from Egypt and the Arab region at large?
Well, Egypt has supported what we call the Berlin process. In January 2020, many heads of state, among them, of course, President al-Sisi, attended an international conference called by both Germany and the United Nations in order to set out a political process that shows the way for transiting Libya from a state of insecurity and instability to a state of having a unity government, having a legitimate government elected and chosen and elected by the Libyan people. And that's, as a matter of fact, that's the objective of the international community. And Egypt shares the international community in working towards realization of this objective, namely the elections on December 24th, 2021, whereby the Libyan people, in a fair and free and transparent elections, would choose whom they represent. So Egypt is working with the Libyans and with the international community towards this goal. Once the Libyan people chooses his government, I guess Egypt would wholeheartedly support the choice made by the Libyan people. Meanwhile, we have, as President Sisi said, we are ready, we are willing to lend any kind of support that the Libyan transitional government would request in order to stabilize Libya and in order to help the transitional Libyan government in securing the December elections. This is a very important date, December 24th, and I guess Egypt has promised to sustain and help Libya in working towards organizing these elections. Yes. Having said that, of course, there are some roadblocks on the road. The most serious, the most dangerous, I would say, the armed militias on the one hand, and the foreign troops and mercenaries on the other hand. And I guess as the international community is pushing for the December elections, also it's pushing for the withdrawal of all mercenaries, of all foreign troops, and of dismantling the armed militias, in particularly in the western part of Libya. These are roadblocks, but we understand that although they are very serious threats to the future stability of Libya, but the international community, represented by the Security Council, has made it clear that any party that would lend support to these militias, or any party, whether regional or otherwise, would impede the dismantling of the militias and the withdrawal of the foreign mercenaries and forces, yes, would be subject to sanctions. So this is a very serious commitment on the part of the international community, and it's a reassuring one. It's a reassuring one, madam, to say the least.
Yes, very much indeed. Ambassador Hussein Hariri, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for being with us over the phone.
Thank you, madam.
And for your input in this particular file. Before we go on with our files, let's have this quick report. And it's Saudi and Iranian officials plan further direct talks this month, though no date has been set. But let's watch the report.
Saudi and Iranian officials plan further direct talks this month, though no date has been set, with the aim of easing tension between the two rivals in a significant move for regional stability. Saudi Arabia and Iran are locked in a rivalry that has played out in proxy conflicts across the region, including in Yemen. Riyadh has also blamed Tehran for a 2019 attack on Saudi oil facilities, a charge that Tehran denied. Neither Riyadh nor Tehran, who cut diplomatic ties in 2016, have publicly confirmed or denied the first meeting in Iraq earlier this month, though Iran's envoy to Baghdad has welcomed Iraqi mediation to mend ties with the Gulf states. The talks come as the United States pursues diplomacy in Vienna to revive world power's 2015 nuclear accord with Iran, which Washington abandoned 3 years ago, and Riyadh has opposed for not tackling Tehran's ballistic missiles program and wider regional behavior. Sources reveal that further talks could happen before the end of the month, but the timing depends on progress in Vienna negotiations. A foreign diplomat in Riyadh said a second meeting is expected in late April or early May. The talks, which proceeded after the Iraqi Prime Minister visited Riyadh, are being led by Saudi intelligence chief Khalid Humaydan and Saeed Irvani, the Deputy Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. The main focus, three of the sources, including the diplomat, said has been on Yemen, where a coalition led by Saudi Arabia is battling the Iranian elite Houthi group that has ramped up drone and missile attacks on Saudi Arabia. The regional official said that the Iranian side promised to use Tehran's influence to halt Houthi attacks on Saudi Arabia and in return requested that Riyadh support the nuclear talks, an account confirmed by another source familiar with the matter.
Right, welcome back, and back to what we were speaking about, or our third file, which is the Saudi-Iranian kind of talks that took place recently in Baghdad. We have with us over the phone to discuss the issue, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister.
Hello, yes.
Good evening,
yes.
Good afternoon to you, Ambassador Bayoumi.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Yes, we're speaking about this very particular issue. We're speaking about Iran and Saudi Arabia and holding talks in Baghdad. So this is new. Talks between Saudi, direct talks between the Saudi side and the Iranian side is something new. How do you view such approachment, and how do you view such talks?
I hope this will lead us to a much better situation. This is the first time, as you rightly said, that Saudi's diplomacy is talking to the Iranian one. And I am quite confident that Iran is a very old civilization. Same thing about the Saudis, and they have very advanced diplomacy. So I hope that they can find the way to talk reason to us, to themselves, and that they can find a common ground to solve their differences, especially that they are big countries in what we call the Islamic Conference. We were aiming a few years ago to establish what we call the D8 between the big Islamic countries in order to cooperate in fields like industry or agriculture and so on. Unfortunately, one of a sudden, we are divided now between Muslim Sunni and Muslim Shia, and the Emirates occupying territories in the Emirate and threatening other Arab countries. This cannot work at all, and nobody will accept this sort of policy. So let us hope that both countries, and they have traditional good diplomacy, to find ground to come forward and to find areas of agreement between them instead of having many areas of disagreement.
We're speaking here about three important files. Iran says it always welcomes dialogue with Saudi Arabia. But in fact, what we have seen was a kind of proxy wars that went on in Yemen. We have seen Iran in several proxy wars, even not direct ones, but as we're speaking, proxy ones in several areas in the region. There are three important issues that need to be resolved in such talks. One would be those proxy wars, the interference of Iran in some of the Arab countries, and the nuclear pact, or the nuclear agreement, the 5+1, and it's all about. So let us speak first of all about the proxy wars in the region and the Iranian interference, and what do does the Gulf area want from Iran? What do we need from Iran in order for those talks to be of success?
We need practical attitude and we need work, not words. And this is similar to our situation with Turkey, where we have very good wordings here and there, but we don't have on the ground yet movement towards cooperation there. And you are right about that we should expect some change in the policy in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Syria, because they are interfering in all those places. Also, they are still occupying Arab territories in the Emirate. I must confess to you that I am guilty in the third problem, which is the nuclear activities. Because this is not fair in the whole world, and especially the West is not treating this file fairly. They are very angry, very nervous whenever it comes to the nuclear activities in Iran or in Korea, North Korea. But they shut their mouths completely if it comes to Israel. And we are claiming, we are complaining, and we are blaming them about this attitude. And once we asked a high-rank diplomat from the States, he was lecturing us in Cairo, why are you so nervous about Iran and you do not open your mouth concerning Israel? He said, because the system in Israel is democratic and in Iran it is not. My goodness, I told him immediately, if you are the victim, would you be happy if you are bombed by a democratic bomb? The bomb is a bomb by all means. So here I think that we have to satisfy those countries like Iran, like Egypt, like any country who would be satisfied with a peaceful program for energy, and to help them, not to making noise every now and then. So I sympathize, I have to confess that I sympathize the Iranian position there.
Yes. Speaking about the nuclear agreement, and we've seen the last administration walking out of this agreement, while this one said it would renegotiate rather, re-entering into the agreement once again. So how do you view the course of this agreement with Iran, and what should be the next phase? Particularly, we're speaking here about renewed nuclear talks in Vienna in this very upcoming period.
I hope that every side is ready to give concessions, because in the negotiations, any sort of negotiation, it is not what we call a zero-sum game. No, it is 50-50. You have to give and take. I wouldn't agree under any conditions that whenever I negotiate, that I give 100% and get nothing.
Yes, of course.
So, let us hope that every side, whether the Americans, Europe, and Iran, would give something to the other, a sort of confidence that they are going to the right direction. And here, really, I must say that I am satisfied in general with the European position, because the American position during the administration of President Trump was not fair at all. So let us hope that Iran will not be stubborn here and will accept to exchange concessions here and there from all the sides.
Right.
Iran is complaining that it is punished, and they want to come to the negotiation table whenever the punishments are stopped. The others are saying, no, stop the nuclear activities first. So it is a matter of timing, and a good negotiator can reach a good position for all parties.
Right. We're speaking here about talks or the Baghdad talks that comes amid those renewed nuclear talks. We're also speaking at the same time about the Arab League expressing extreme concern over Iran's decision to enrich uranium up to 60%. How will that reflect on the Arab or the Saudi-Iranian negotiations from one side and on the Vienna talks on the nuclear agreement on the other hand?
Of course, I can understand the position of the Arab League because we cannot take any position rather than the position of our member states. So that would explain the position of the Arab League. Of course, they are supporting the Saudi position and the Emirate also. So this is understandable if we realize that, of course, we shall support the position of the Saudi Arabia and the Emirates concerning any negotiations with the Iranian side.
Right. Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former assistant foreign minister, thank you so much for being with us over the phone here and for your input here. And I guess that takes us to the end of this episode of our program, Arab Affairs. Next Saturday, we'll see other Arab files. Until next Saturday, it's goodbye.